What's going on, YouTube? It's Father Dark. We're here bright and early, and we're talking about Battlefield 6 and some of the rumors and information and things like that that people have said that are close to the game. So I noticed the other day on Twitter, what was the other day? It was a couple of weeks ago at this point. But nonetheless, though, someone that was close to the game made a statement that got a lot of people up in arms, and they were basically just saying that they wanted to compete this time around with Call of Duty, right? They further went on to elaborate that they would basically have like a battle royale mode that would be close to kind of like the business model of Call of Duty, where they have Warzone, which is separate from the main game, and then they have the main game or whatever. But the battle royale would be a free to play kind of option. And I just kind of want to go on a rant and just kind of talk about why I think that actually isn't a bad idea as long as it's done correctly, right? So before we get into that, let's just say, it seems like on both sides, you kind of have like two sides, right? And you have one side that feels like games will die, in player count and stuff like that if they don't have a battle royale, right? And then you have this other side that feels like battle royales are toxic and they just kind of they suck all the air out of the room, and they also stop developers from putting more time and energy into campaigns and multiplayer. So we're gonna get to that too. But before we get to that, let's just talk about like kind of like the history of Battlefield, right? So Battlefield has been around for a long time, just like Call of Duty's been around for a long time. Now I don't know the exact year that the very first one came out, et cetera, et cetera. And that is something that I probably should have pulled up, but I really don't think that matters, right? All I know is that basically around the same time that I got into COD, which you're talking about 20 years ago, I'm an older guy here, and around that time, you always had like these battlefield games. Same thing, but at the same time, you also had games like Medal of Honor, et cetera, right? And the thing that I feel like has separated Call of Duty from all of these other games is that they have constantly, and when I say constantly, I mean every year, annually, for over 2 decades now. It's a long time. We're talking about 22, 23 years at this point, maybe, that Call of Duty has been consistently pumping out a new game every single year, right? Whereas Battlefield has only pumped out what, like 6, 7 games. I mean, I'm sure there's been like a couple like here and there that might have been like more like in between smaller games and stuff. But we're talking about like their main popular like releases and stuff, right? Nonetheless, like to me, that's not, you can't really compete unless you're just making a game that's just massively better, but when the game is still kind of like generally the same thing, shy of like really the only difference has been like maybe they have like higher player like lobbies and stuff like that, meaning like you get 64 people in like a lobby on like a bigger like war mode scale type of deal, and then also to like destructible things in these lobbies or whatever, right? So but outside of that, it's kind of like the same thing, right? When most people go and they look at the games on the shelf, and they're looking for something new to play, obviously they're going to go with a game that is making annual releases versus a game that is only coming out every handful of years, right? Like you can only choose what is actually there. But are you going to buy the same game multiple times over and over again, or continuously play it for years at a time when there's new content that's coming out that seems more refreshing, even if it's just kind of the same thing reskinned or whatever? So that's just kind of like how the average consumer is going to look at this, right? Versus like the diehard fans who, they fell in love with Battlefield and that's all they want to play, right? So nonetheless, though, when we look back at like kind of what happened with Battlefield and their kind of like fall from grace, I think we have to look back at more like Battlefield 4, and that's when they were kind of like at their peak. I feel like Battlefield 4 was an amazing game. Now honestly, I didn't play Battlefield 5 because at that point I think I was just kind of tired with like the World War II setting. It was just very irritating to me, and plus there were other games out at the time that I was playing, right? But I've heard a lot of people have nothing but good things to say about Battlefield 5, right? But when we look at Battlefield 5, the game came out, and I'm just going to pull this up here. So it said, in November, it was reported that Battlefield 5 had sold fewer copies than half the physical units or half the physical units than Battlefield 1 did upon its launch during the same period of time. The game sold 7.3 million units by the end of 2018. On February 5th, 2019, EA's CEO Andrew Wilson announced that the game ultimately failed to meet sales expectations, blaming the game's marketing as well as their focus on developing a single-player campaign instead of a Battle Royale mode. Okay, so he said they focused on developing a single player campaign instead of a battle royale genre, which had gained recent widespread popularity. So, and then it also says too that Wilson also highlighted Battlefield 5's long development cycle and release in a month of strong competition. So there you go, right there, right? So like as a business versus being like a person who's just kind of like looking at a game, it's very easy for us to sit back and go, well, I think you should do this. I think you should do this. And I think that we tend to forget that like as individuals, our opinions are not always shared by the average consumer, right? Like I feel like lots of different companies should do lots of different things. I might go and get a Mountain Dew drink. Mountain Dew has like numerous different flavors, right? Like there might be one flavor that I really, really enjoy, and I think it's like the best flavor ever, right? But the thing is that 99.9% of other people may disagree and think that another flavor is really good, right? So then I get irritated when I go in the store and that flavor that I like is never really there because the store doesn't sell very many of them, right? Like I may buy a couple here and there, but if there's hundreds of another flavor being bought, of course, the store from a business standpoint is going to say, we have to stock more of this other flavor, right? Like, F what Dark is thinking. He doesn't make up our whole entire base or whatever, right? Or, all of our consumers. He's just one guy, right? So that's kind of like how that mindset goes, right? And around this time, I don't think that this guy, Andrew Wilson, was wrong. There's a reason why he's a CEO. He didn't just wake up one morning and step outside and go, hey, bro, you want to be a CEO? No, he has to sit back. He has to look at data and analyze different things. And I don't think that it would take a rocket scientist, honestly, to understand that in 2018, you have to think about what the market looked like, right? Let's look over here. I think I pulled it up. So I'm pretty sure Black Ops 4 released, October 12th, 2018. Let's see, November 9th, 2018. All right, so you had Black Ops 4. Now, I don't remember if Black Ops 4 came out. If Blackout came out like with, let's just look that up really quick. Let's see. Blackout release date. So, yeah, there we go. I don't see it. It launched April 2nd, 2019. Okay, so I'm assuming that that's right. It says April 23rd, 2019. Okay, so that game mode didn't come out initially with the game, but it doesn't really matter though. I'm pretty sure that they were telling people that it was going to come out, and when you bought the game, you already kind of had an idea that like that game mode was going to eventually like come out, right? So back to the point that I'm making, right? Back in 2018, Fortnite had already came out, right? You already had PUBG. So this guy saying that this mode had become extremely popular, of course, there's still people who didn't care about Battle Royale because it was a new mode. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of people don't like change. The majority of people that I come across on a daily basis don't like change with really anything. Whether it be like the food they're used to eating, TV shows and how they're delivered, movies, all types of stuff, right? Like comic books, I don't care. When you start to like change pretty much anything, a lot of people get very irritated. But then you have a younger generation of people that are way more susceptible to change because they haven't had time to start to have like these ideas and stuff ingrained in their head as to how things should be, right? So, and I think that's like a big portion of the people that agree with Battle Royale, which is the younger generation, with the exception of some people like myself, where I've always been more susceptible to change with things. Like, yeah, there's a period of time where you have to kind of get used to things, but I'm fine with like change and stuff, and actually like enjoy when things update and become different than how they've been over time, when people put new twists on things versus just giving me the same regurgitated stuff every single year. But like I said, it tends to be a wider group of people that are younger, I noticed, that don't mind a lot of these changes and want them, versus the older people who have been around in the gaming scene forever, and they just kind of say, hey, let's just keep it multiplayer and then give us a good campaign and we're good, right? And they kind of feel like they're like this dying breed. But nonetheless, though, like I said, Battlefield, that wasn't what necessarily messed up Battlefield 5 for me personally. One, it was kind of the same thing that happened with Blackout. Blackout was popular, but it was behind a paywall, which I kind of get in one instance because at that time I feel like games as a service hadn't been completely accepted yet. I think Call of Duty was still trying to figure out how to get to the point that they're at now where they have their free to play games that they still, and actually they make more money from Warzone and their cosmetics in Warzone than they do from the actual annual releases of the game. Now they're just smart. They didn't say, well, because we're making more money from Warzone, we're not going to release a game annual anymore. They said, hey, why don't we do both? We can make the annual release premium game money, and we can also make the Warzone money, and whatever else that we feel like doing in the future. So at that time, like I said, they were still trying to figure it out. But you got to think, 2018, all this stuff was still new. Fortnite, it just came out at the end of 2017. PUBG slightly before that or whatever. So nonetheless, though, when you put the battle royales behind a paywall, you're already kind of like capping yourself because people are going to have to pay to play your game, whereas making it accessible to anyone and then them getting in there and then just kind of milking them from the monetizations and stuff like that from the game, right? So that was one aspect, right? Battlefield 5 comes out. They don't have a battle royale. They only thought to make it kind of after the fact. And then once the battle royale came out, because a lot of people, they're saying that too, like in the comments of, a lot of these posts about Battlefield 6 and them having, like a Warzone equivalent. They say, well, when Firestorm came out, it didn't really do that good. And look at how that worked out for them. And I have to disagree. If any game comes out and you don't put very much effort into it, you don't update it often, it's kind of one of those things where you can tell it was an afterthought, which Fortnite is kind of the only exception because even though they made it as an afterthought, they continuously updated it and changed stuff weekly when it first started coming out. I mean, when you got to think about when Fortnite first came out, it was just this giant open map with like 5 or 6 locations on this huge map. And besides that, it was just trees and like little cliffside type deals. But then they continuously updated it. And then we started getting things like battle passes and all types of stuff that got people to want to like come back and play it. They started having a store that had all types of wacky skins and stuff in it. So that's kind of like an exception in my opinion. But with Firestorm, they just kind of said, well, here's something to play. And the thing is, I think Firestorm had a really cool concept. I've always thought like the gas and stuff and like whatever Fortnite does with like the purple thing or whatever, the electricity field and all that kind of stuff. I always thought that was kind of silly and it was just something that, we got to have something that forces you to a smaller zone or people would just kind of camp and the games would take 8 years to complete. But I thought that Firestorm was one. I think Battlefield has always had amazing graphics. I think that's something like, especially like with Battlefield 5, the graphics were stunning. Like even like the map and stuff for Firestorm, I thought like, wow, everything just looked cool. All the weapons sounded cool. They had tanks and stuff like that. The actual fire, the fact that it like engulfed buildings and stuff, so you could no longer like just sit in a building and make gas plays, or it's not gas, it's fire. But you get what I'm saying though, right? Like in Call of Duty, I can get a million stems, a gas mask. They even have a thing that allows you to sit in the smoke. It looks like a trophy system that you put down, and for like 20 seconds or so, it allows you to just kind of sit in like this bubble that's free of gas or whatever. So there was certain things about Firestorm that I thought were amazing, right? But you look at Firestorm now, it's a dead game mode. I watched a video of like Jack Frags trying to play from last year, and he could barely get 10 people to fill up the lobby. Even though that's like I don't know, like half of like the amount of people that can be in one of the lobbies. Nonetheless, though, a game, like I said, a game can come out and it can be good. It can have all the things that it needs to have, but you have to, with people nowadays, we're so used to games as a service where they're constantly updated every couple of weeks, every month, whatever the cycle is for these things, to where if you just release something and say, here you go, boom, and we're not going to come back to this for like 6 to 8 months, and even then we're just going to add 1 or 2 little tiny things in, and you should be pleased by that. People are just going to go somewhere else. It's just as simple as that. It's nothing personal, right? So I don't think that Firestorm died because Battlefield players didn't enjoy the mode or anything like that. I think it's just, they didn't put enough effort into it, right? Same thing with the actual game itself. Like you don't put much effort into it, and the player base is going to drop. So after we had Battlefield 5, we end up getting Battlefield, was it 2042, I think is the name of the game. Nonetheless, though, I think most people know what happened with that game. That game released, and it was an actual terrible release. I think a lot of people say it's the worst game release in history, but to be honest with you, I think that was up to Cyberpunk, right? Cyberpunk came out. I have literally in my whole entire gaming lifetime never seen a game get removed from the actual like store. Like with, PlayStation actually completely took it off and refunded everyone regardless of how much time you put into it. And I have never seen that with a game before, right? But Battlefield 2042, when it came out, the game was so buggy, it was just like unplayable. You're talking about like textures completely not loading. There was no scoreboard, which is insane to me. How do you release a game? Excuse me. How do you release a game at this point in time in life with all the knowledge that we have, all the years and information and things that should just be like the most basic things that you put into a game and not have a scoreboard, right? Like who doesn't want to know what the score is in an FPS game or any game for that matter? That was just insane to me. But nonetheless, though, the game came out and it was actually terrible. Now I've been noticing that this is like a trend with like a lot of games lately since Cyberpunk has came out, right? Where a lot of people just go, look, we're gonna spend more time hyping up this game and selling merch and doing all these different things. Look at games like No Man's Sky, right? They promise so much stuff. And what's weird is like, in my opinion, you don't have to promise any of these things. You can just tell people like, look, we're starting this game out. It's a work in progress, right? Look at like Fortnite. Fortnite didn't come out and say, yo, this is going to be a whole new crazy experience. We're going to have blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. And then the game comes out and they don't have any of that stuff. It's better to just kind of like drop a game on people, let them play it in like its base kind of, like version. And then as time goes on, update it and give like roadmaps to what you would like to do, but don't necessarily say that this is something that we're promising you is going to happen, right? But you look at like No Man's Sky, game comes out, they hype it up, they say all these different things that they're going to do, and then, it takes 5-6 years before it gets to a point to where it's even half of like what they said it was going to be. Same thing with Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk literally lied to people and showed 45 minutes of gameplay for the game before the game was even completed. They even said themselves, we made that, just for E3. And we hadn't even like fully completed the game yet. The game, like, we just basically made a 45-minute long playable demo concept, right? And then when the game came out, completely unplayable. Now we're at like 4 or 5 years later or whatever, or however long it's been since Cyberpunk is released. And now the game is just now to a point to where it's playable. And you have a lot of people saying, oh, I don't understand where all the hate for Cyberpunk comes from. Well, because if you were somebody who started playing the game initially, of course, because you got to think about it, right? Like the first trailer I saw for Cyberpunk was like back in like 2012. So you wait all these years, a little under a decade for a game to come out. They've been promising you all this stuff for all this time. And the game comes out and it's worse than I saw a video where like people were comparing it like to other open world games, and they couldn't even compare it to like any of the GTAs or anything. They had to go back to like one of the original open world games from years and years ago, and it still was like just worse in every category than the that game or whatever. So I feel like that's kind of like where a lot of games are going, and that's kind of what happened with Battlefield 2042 is they spent more time and energy hyping up the game, trying to get people interested in it. And then it's like, well, once we get you in here, maybe you'll just put up with the fact that the game is actually terrible and just kind of stick it out with us while we figure it out. And you could also kind of blame it on EA because EA has had one of the most controversial runs as far as, it's like the meme they have where it's just like they put like the credit card reader in the controller, and that's like how you pretty much do anything in the game. It's just by sticking your credit card in it, which I don't agree with, obviously. And the thing is a lot of people will try to compare that to just any kind of like monetizations in games, which I think that personally, when you make a game free to play, you're bringing in a bunch of people that would not have normally played your game. Kind of like talking about that game that I was playing a few months back, Delta Force, Black Hawk Ops or whatever, right? So with that game, that's the kind of game where like I normally I wouldn't have paid $60 to just try that game out, right? Like to me, that's weird to spend that much money to just try something out to see if I like it, only to not like it and be like, oh, that's wasted, right? If I spend money on a cosmetic in a game that I'm already playing, I know what I'm getting beforehand, right? Like I know the game is something I already enjoy, right? I know what the cosmetic looks like. They're going to show me all that stuff, an example, whatever, and then I can choose to get it or not. But ultimately, though, I can still play the game and have access to all the same loadouts, all the same everything except the cosmetics, and enjoy the game. So, and that's kind of like, I think, the average person. Like, they don't just have money to just throw at games every 2 seconds just to be able to like play them or whatever. And when you have a lot of other competition out there, that's the easiest way to get people to give your game a chance. And then once they fall in love with it, then they'll be more welcoming to spending, money on monetizations or whatever, right? So I think that's the trade-off, because obviously if the game is free to play, you're going to have some way to get people to spend some type of money on the game, versus if you just release the game and it's 60, $70 and then you go, okay, well, we're not gonna monetize it. But like, honestly, when you do that, once someone has bought the game, what real motivation is there for them to continue to update the game and add things to it if they're no longer making any money off of it, right? Like, imagine if your job said, hey, come work for us at McDonald's or whatever, and we're gonna pay you $10,000 initially, but then after that, we're not going to give you any money for the year. You're going to be like, what in the world? Like, you know what I'm saying? I mean, why would you not? You know what I'm saying? There's no motivation for you to keep coming back after a period of time, right? After you've done whatever the length of that initial work was for that pay. So it's kind of the same thing with games versus, I think it's just better for everyone, because even as a free-to-play player, yeah, you might not get a lot of the cosmetics and stuff like that, but at the same time, you're going to continue to get all of the new maps and modes and different things that come out. You're still going to have access to these things. So that's just my personal opinion. I know that a lot of people find that to be very controversial and don't like that, but that's just me personally. Nonetheless, though, I'm going to kind of start getting to a point where I wrap this up here. Like I said, this video is just a rant. I like to do these every now and again. So, now that we've covered kind of what happened with the whole Battlefield 5 and Firestorm and, Battlefield 2042, I think that has put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, personally, and it's kind of been like the downfall of Battlefield. And I think that instead of them talking about it or doing any of that kind of stuff or trying to build up any hype, here's a crazy idea. Why don't we do kind of like Apex did, where, I'm referring to Apex Legends, where you just kind of make a good game and then release it. You don't need to hype it up. You don't need to spend some crazy amount of money on marketing and all of this stuff. Like this guy, Andrew Wilson, said, he's saying, oh, the blame in the game is marketing. When you make a good game, you don't have to market it at all. People will play the game and they will tell other people like, yo, this game's amazing. Content creators will make videos, all this different stuff. People will stream the game, et cetera, et cetera. And you kind of have free marketing now because content creation is so popular. It's not like back in the days of, before, content creation was such a big thing where people just didn't know a game existed unless it was, those giant signs out in front of Blockbuster or whatever. Yeah, I'm that old. I remember Blockbuster. But yeah, no, it's not like that. Nowadays, you jump on YouTube, and if a game is really, really good, just like with something like Fortnite, they didn't have to do a bunch of marketing. People just started playing the game, and the more and more that people played it, the more people started making content, and people were talking about it. News articles started covering it, et cetera, et cetera. You had different streamers, and then it branched out to where even celebrities and stuff were playing the game so much that it was just, it was starting to cut into like their crafts and stuff, So I think that's all they need to really do is just make a good game. But at the same time, though, I don't think that they should just solely focus on Warzone. I'm not Warzone, but their version of a Warzone or Battle Royale or whatever. And, I feel the same with any game where that's not how it was originally like designed, right? Like where you have like a game like Fortnite where they had Save the World, but nobody wanted to play it, right? So then they went to the Battle Royale sector and people rushed in, right? Became one of the most popular games on the planet. If you're something like Call of Duty, I do feel like there's still a place for multiplayer. Even though I don't enjoy multiplayer as much as I enjoy bigger map things like Warzone and stuff like that. Same thing with zombies. Like zombies isn't my go-to thing. I prefer to go up against real people that are actually shooting back. But I know that there's a whole base that really loves zombies. So zombies, there should be a market for just that, of people that are passionate about zombies. There should be developers that are working specifically on multiplayer, that give multiplayer its time and energy, so that the people that want to play that are happy. Same thing with the Warzone people. Have your own group of developers that solely work on that, et cetera, and give everything kind of equal energy. But at the same time, though, I also understand, because it's kind of a double-edged sword, I also understand if, let's say that there's only 20% of your base that's playing, the core 6v6 multiplayer type of deal, right? And the other 80% is playing Warzone, right? Or we'll say, let's say it's like 20 for multiplayer, 20 for zombies, and then 60% for Warzone. I understand from a business standpoint how you're going to want to put more energy into the thing that is financially benefiting you more. You're a business at the end of the day. It's not personal. It's not like, well, what about how these 20% of guys feel or whatever. Yeah, that's cool, and you can still make the multiplayer and stuff. But at the same time, though, how can you get upset at, like I said, like I did the comparison with the drink and the different flavors? If only me and a handful of other people are coming in here buying the specific flavor of Mountain Dew, why would I think that if millions of people every day are buying this other flavor, that's not going to be the one that they're going to keep in stock more? They're a business. They want to make money. That's like, what are we doing? We live in a capitalistic society, right? And the whole thing with that is like making money. All of us want to make money. There's nobody out there that's just like, I don't like money. Well, that means that you like being homeless and hungry. And I don't know anyone that likes any of those things. No one at all. It's just, unfortunately, that's how it is sometimes for people. But at the end of the day, though, if we all had the option to make millions of dollars versus make, a couple hundred, people are going to choose the millions. It's just that simple, right? And it's not anything to hurt anyone's feelings, but I know that it does feel that way when you're personally passionate about something and it just doesn't work out the way that you want it to, or things aren't getting the focus that you feel like they should. Nonetheless, though, like I said, just wrapping it up here, Battlefield 6 has potential to be a competitor against COD. Really, any game has has the ability to compete against COD. But I say Battlefield more simply because EA has tons of different developers that can make a good game. I don't know why Battlefield 2042 came out in the state that it came out in. Maybe it was because of the culture at the time, and they saw that people will still buy games even when they're not complete, kind of like with Cyberpunk and stuff like that, because Cyberpunk still sold ridiculously well, and to this day is still, after the anime came out, still selling like crazy. Maybe they saw that, and they saw it with a lot of other games that were kind of coming out half baked, and then they say, hey, we'll stick it out with this and we'll fix it down the road. Nonetheless, though, if they just make a good game and it's solid in all aspects, right? Whether, you're talking about like they don't make a campaign and they just make an extremely solid, multiplayer that is respectful of how they used to be. And then you make a really good free-to-play Battle Royale that brings a lot of people in, because a lot of times that is the case. You'll have a lot of people that come in through the free-to-play side and they get so intrigued with the game. They go, hey, you know what? I want to play the multiplayer now because maybe that seems like it's more chill and I can respawn. I don't have to worry about the one life thing or whatever the case is, right? Or, for multiple different reasons. But it's proven that when people come in through play, why do you think so many mobile games are free to play? My wife, she sits back and she plays mobile games all day long. And I'll see little charges on the card and stuff like that where it's like, $7 here, $8 here, $7 here. I'll ask her like, yo, why did you, spend the, not that I, personally care, but it's more just like personal curiosity. What's making you spend these little, amounts of money and stuff like that here and there on the game? It's just like, oh, I'm playing this restaurant game, and to open up a new restaurant or to bring down the timer or whatever, I had to, spend $7 or $8 to advance, or however it works, right? I don't play stuff like that, but that's kind of like the answers that she's given in the past. And like I said, when I looked at the statistics on like mobile games and stuff, they make ridiculously crazy amounts of money. You're talking about billions and billions of dollars from like microtransactions and stuff that people play. So it financially, it's just kind of like a better decision for them to to have some option that is a free to play game. And I feel like usually that is like the best thing to do is do it with a battle royale mode versus saying, okay, we're going to make the multiplayer free to play, but then charge for the battle royale version. It just seems like that works out better for them. But I do think that you can have both, not just both, but like multiple different modes that all cater to different people. Some people just like the really intense campaigns and want to sit on their 80-inch TV after they get off work and have a couple brewskis and, just relax. Some people enjoy that, endless life kind of respawning from multiplayer and all that stuff. And then you have the people that enjoy the one life modes and stuff. And it's okay to not want to play one of those things, but to be upset or irritated with the fact that they're being developed and that those things will be accessible to other people. I don't really get that. You have to understand that there's investors that allow these people to have the funds to make these massive AAA games versus these more like indie games that are made with a handful of people, sometimes less, that are very simple to the point, easily playable, basic graphics, and they only have these very niche player bases and stuff until they end up making the next one or whatever, right? But to have something with the replayability of like a Call of Duty or a Warzone or anything like that, Fortnite and that kind of stuff, you're gonna need like massive scales of like developers and stuff like that are being backed financially until the game actually releases and gets the sales and stuff that it's gonna get. And, if I ask you to put money into a business that I have, you're going to want to know how I'm going to not only get you that money back, but then make you 2-3 times the amount of money that I made you. And you're not going to care, like, if I'm starting a lemonade stand and, you see the little Timmy across the street has 3 different flavors of lemonade to offer. And I'm like, well, you know what? I just want to keep things basic and give people the basic version of lemonade because that's what I'm used to and that's what I grew up with. Okay, but are you gonna be able to make as much money as little Timmy? Because if not, I'm about to go over here and invest in him. He's got raspberry lemonade, blueberry lemonade, whatever. I don't know, different types of lemonade, but you get what I'm saying though, right? Like, you got to be able to make these people happy because that's just how a business works. And gaming, like anything else, is a business. It's just as simple as that. I've said that in previous videos, but, I just have to keep reiterating it because I think a lot of people think these people just sit around and do this stuff for fun and then go work at, their 9 to 5 all day. This is their 9 to 5. This is their job. This is how they feed themselves, their families, whatever, right? And expecting anything less to me is just kind of wild. But, we're going to wrap it up, though. We're coming up on the 30-minute mark or where we passed it, whatever. So, these are just things to think about. But like I said, though, Battlefield 6 definitely... There's a market out there and it's good to have competition, right? Like, because if not, then you just kind of have like monopolies where, which COD kind of is at the moment next to, you have Apex, you got Fortnite and stuff like that. But in regards to like just the non out there shooters and stuff like Fortnite and Apex are a little bit more, on their own kind of like thing. And COD is like really the only game that's just a regular kind of like military game at this point. And I know people say, oh, well, they got all the crazy cosmetics and stuff. But at its core, it's just it's a more arcadey kind of, not, I don't want to say milsim, but you get what I'm saying, right? Like it's a military type of game. That's its core thing, right? So yeah, like they don't really have any like competition right now. I think Battlefield is the only competition that realistically can compete on like the AAA kind of level right now that wouldn't just be coming out of like nowhere, right? But they're gonna have to really sit down and say, hey, what went wrong with Battlefield 2042? And even still, like I said, Firestorm was not a bad mode. They just didn't do anything to it. After it released, they just kind of said, here, take this. You guys happy now? People were like, yeah, for like 2 weeks. And then, okay, are you going to do anything else with this? No? All right, whatever. So, but, that's what it is. And, like I said, this is Father Dark, and I'm about to get off of here. But I do appreciate you guys watching, and I will catch you on the next one.